Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Chelsea Ohlemiller, and I am here with my series, Grief and Goodbyes, and I could not be more honored and excited. This has been on my heart since I received his email. I am super excited to introduce to you today Rabbi Steve Leder, and he is not only the author of The Beauty of What Remains, which is my absolute favorite book, and we will talk about that, but he is also the senior rabbi at Wilshire Boulevard Temple, which is one of the biggest temples in the world, I believe, and just an absolute incredible inspiration for so many around the world. And so I would just like to welcome you, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. I'm really proud of the work you're doing, and I'm glad to be a part of it. I really am.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. So my first thing that I want to show everybody your book and remind everybody that the information to purchase this book and all of your website and how to get, your content will be in the comments. If anybody watching has questions, please feel free to put those in there as well. But basically, this book, like I've already explained to him, I was a couple years into loss when I saw this book. And I purchased it right away. I had been purchasing a lot of grief books, and until I read these words, nothing felt more true and comforting and real and even humorous than this book. And I have since purchased copies for friends. You can see my little notes. And
You're the one.
I just would love to know, first off, how has this book, we know that it's changed the lives of other people, but has this book changed your life?
Well, first of all, writing the book certainly did, because it gave me the opportunity to take so many of my newfound feelings and reassessments about grief. I'd been a rabbi for 30 years before I wrote this book. And I thought I knew a lot about grief and loss of all kinds. And then my father died, and I realized that most of what I thought I knew wasn't really the deepest truth of it all.
Right.
And so the opportunity to really, in a systematic way, tell the story of the journey from sort of professional around loss to becoming a son who loses his father, with whom he had a complicated relationship.
Right.
Was a very healing opportunity for me just in the writing of it. So it changed me just by writing it. It helped me get my arms even more around my own feelings, right?
Right.
And the other thing it did, it also changed my life in another way because of its popularity. And, Penguin Random House is an amazing publisher. And even though the book launched the day before the insurrection at the Capitol, it still, did really, really well. And I didn't, Chelsea, I didn't write this book intending for it to land in the middle of a pandemic.
Right.
But it did. And everyone was struggling with loss. Yep. The loss of a job, the loss of our sense of invulnerability, the loss of being able to hug and hold the people we love and be held by them, the loss of having our kids in school where they belong, and the loss of so many lives.
Absolutely.
So it just hit the zeitgeist in a way no one could have predicted. I set out to write an evergreen book that would always be useful and meaningful to people, because it's a combination of a field guide and a memoir. It's both.
Yep.
Which was the tricky part in writing it. But it also just captured the moment of COVID in a way that really helped people, and it's enlarged my platform, my following. I got another book deal right away from Penguin Random House, and that book is finished and will be out in June of 2022. And that book is called For You When I Am Gone.
Oh my gosh!
And it's about questions we should ask ourselves and answer so that we can create a legacy letter for our loved ones after we're gone.
Oh, that is beautiful. If you need
Yeah.
somebody to proofread it or read it early, you've
All
got
right.
an audience right here.
I finished it. I took a 3-month sabbatical and finished it. So yeah, the book has changed me, and it's helped me grieve.
Yeah.
It's helped me process my grief. We all process grief in different ways. And for me, if I can tell the story, I can own the feelings.
Yep, absolutely. Well, and it's such a beautiful legacy, not only for your father and that relationship, but also for, your own family, because it's just this beautiful storytelling of something that is, extremely universal. Everybody goes through it. And it was I think what's so comforting is that you were so raw and open and said, look, I had been sitting by the bedsides of people who were dying for years and years and years, but my own father's death really changed me. And
Yes.
I think hearing that from somebody who is a spiritual leader and somebody that everybody looks up to, it's like, okay, wow, then I can own my feelings too, because everybody, it doesn't matter who you are, even if you're the most faithful person, you're still going to struggle.
Death is the great equalizer in so many ways.
Absolutely.
And also, I think, if not the only, definitely the most powerful teacher any of us will ever encounter.
Absolutely.
I know you were a teacher for many years, and you know something about the power of teachable moments. And death is Kafka said the meaning of life is that it ends.
Yep.
And it's so simple and so profound and so true.
Yep.
Rabbi means teacher. I spent a lot of my life teaching others. It takes a lot to pierce through all of that and to humble me and open me. And my father's death did that. In my book before this book, which is a book called More Beautiful Than Before, How Suffering Transforms Us, I talk about this. And I know not all your listeners are religious, but I think the point is still a good one for all of us. There's a verse in the Bible that says God puts God's words upon our hearts. So the sages ask, why upon our hearts? Why not in our hearts?
Right.
Surely if God has the power to put words upon our hearts, God has the power to put them in our hearts. And the answer the sages give is God puts words upon our hearts, but it isn't until our hearts are broken that the words can enter.
Oh, wow.
Which is so beautiful and true and poignant and powerful. And I think it's a way of saying that in the most important way, we are actually more whole when broken.
Yeah. Wow.
I am a more whole human being. I am a better father. I'm a better husband. I'm a better rabbi. I'm a better brother. I'm a better friend because of the loss, and what those 10 years of Alzheimer's taught me as well. And, Dostoevsky said his greatest fear was that his life would not be worthy of his suffering. And I think for you, Chelsea, for me, for those of us who suffered real loss, and your mother died when you were quite young. I think what you are doing is trying to be worthy of that suffering. Right?
Exactly right. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to bring purpose to that,
and meaning, right?
Yep.
And that, therefore, the suffering ceases to be suffering when it ennobles your life, when it gives you some purpose. And nothing does that like finitude, like knowing someday you're going to die. I remember, despite having literally stood with families 1,000 times, I'm not exaggerating, to look at the bodies of their loved ones before we began the funeral, right? It never really affected me. I mean, obviously I was compassionate, but to be honest, like I could have eaten a sandwich and been there. It didn't really affect me all that much because a body is so obviously inanimate and not a person.
Right.
But then when the rabbi of my parents' synagogue in Minneapolis walked me and my 4 siblings and my mother in to see my father's body in that casket, I knew exactly how the rabbi felt in that moment walking us in there, but I had no idea how I was going to feel.
Right.
And my father and I have always looked almost identical if you compared us at the same age. Like if you saw a picture of me at 10 and my father at 10, you couldn't tell the difference.
No.
I'm 61 years old. If you saw a picture of my dad at 61, you wouldn't know who was who. And so there I was, and I looked into my father's casket and at his body, and despite having seen 1,000 dead bodies, it was the first time that I really realized I was going to die. Because it looked like me.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, that's how I'm going to look when I'm dead, and it's going to be my son bending over my casket. And this is what he's going to see. And I am going to truly be gone, whatever that means.
Right.
And that was the moment at 59 years old, after being around 1,000 deaths. That was the moment I realized I was going to die. And that moment changed my life, and for the better, despite its pain.
Wow, that's powerful. And I think that's what a lot of people don't talk about too, because I didn't look like my mother. My sister actually looks a lot more like my mother than I do. But that's the first time looking at my mom in the casket that I remember feeling fear and not telling anybody, because I didn't know what it was yet. But it was this like, okay, there is an end date. There is an end for what this life looks like right now. And so it changed everything for me.
Yeah. Wallace Stevens, the poet, I'm going to paraphrase it badly, but Wallace Stevens said, the beauty of a flower is that it fades. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's why none of us are moved by plastic flowers. Nobody cares about plastic flowers because they have no death.
Right.
They have no life. They're meaningless.
Yep. Wow.
And I'm not for a moment trying to reframe loss as, oh, it's not loss. It's this wonderful experience. It's not. It's painful. It's tearing. It's breaking. But it is also what gives meaning and value and worth and preciousness to our lives.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes your book so special, is that you talk about, that it is this paralyzing pain and this heartbreak and all of these emotions. And you find a way to just bring so much hope and light to this dark thing that we don't, talk about or express.
That's why I called the book The Beauty of What Remains.
Yeah. I mean, even that, the quotes in here about the beauty of what remains, and just so many, you keep quoting all these people, and it's funny because I quote you all the time, because there's just so many beautiful words that you've said. I love, there's a couple of things that just always, I try to use them for other people. People will say, well, what do I say to somebody? You've grieved. So what do I say to somebody? And I always am like, you got to say what Rabbi Steve said. You got to you just show up. You just show up as your authentic self. Yes. That's what I loved, is that you said, just show up as your most authentic self. And those are the people that have still an impact on me today, because the people that showed up with these, fancier versions or dramatic versions, then I felt like I had to do that too. And then I didn't know what to do, how to grieve and be this other person. Exactly
right. And if you just show up and be the friend, the family member, the person you've always been with those who are mourning, that's actually the only thing that reassures them that they're still themselves.
Right.
And that the bottom hasn't completely fallen out of the world.
Right.
So, I tell people, if you're a joker, joke. If you're a feeder, feed. If you're a errand runner, run errands. If you're an organizer, organize. If you're a hugger, hug. Just show up and be yourself. And I've been a rabbi for 34 years, and I still don't know, when I'm standing on a doorstep or in the hallway of a hospital about to enter a room, I don't know what I'm going to say. I just know I have to walk in there and be Steve Leder.
Yep.
And the rest will unfold. And here's the great thing about that advice. We all know how to do that. We
Yep.
all know how to just walk in and be ourselves. The hard part is doing some kind of kabuki and trying to be someone other than yourself.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely.
So I think I'm really glad you brought this up just as an example of the ways in which I'm so glad, because I really wanted the book not to be just the story of this cognitive dissonance or dichotomous tension between rabbi and son, but also a way to hold people's hands through this journey. What do I say? What should I not say? What should I do? What should I not do? And both, if I'm the one who's dying or I'm the one who's grieving, it's the fact that it's held your hand and you passed it on to others to hold their hands through this, what is for many of us, all of us at some point, a first time experience, is really gratifying, because the book was meant to be a handbook, a field guide.
It is.
And I'm glad you've used it that way. It means a lot.
Absolutely. Well, and I will continue to use it. And I think one last thing before we go, I just have to say that one of the most profound things that I mean, there's a million in this book. You can see all my notes, but you said, and you meant it one way, and I've taken it, just the more I read it, because I've reread the book, I take it in so many different directions. But you said at the end, when you were struggling with your own grief, and you said to your wife, I think it was, who willingly walks into rooms so full of other people's pain? And that sentence, it's on like one of my Post-it notes of all my quotes, because it could mean so many different things. And I think you continue to walk into people's rooms full of pain all the time. And you're doing it also through this book and everybody's door that gets it. And also, I just wondered if you've thought of that in a different way too, of like, that's kind of why grief is so taboo. Nobody walks into, these rooms full of someone else's pain willingly, or excited about it. And so just, how did you find the strength to keep doing it?
Well, as far back as I can remember, I've been the kind of person who runs toward pain, who runs toward the fire, who is, there's a helper gene in my DNA. I remember in 4th grade. So how old are you in 4th grade? You were an elementary school teacher. Were you 10?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was a 10-year-old little boy in 4th grade. It was Miss Hollingsworth was my teacher. And there was a girl in the class who was what we today would say on the spectrum. But we didn't have that language in 1970. Right? She was just weird, different, troubled. And I remember fantasizing in my head. Now, I didn't do it, but I fantasized about it. Going to Miss Hollingsworth and saying, I'll use a different name because this is a real person who exists.
Is out there, right?
I said, could I just spend a few minutes with Debbie, because I think I could help her. Now, what a weird concept for a 10-year-old, I guess,
Yeah.
Because the other kids were teasing her, and I teased plenty. As a kid, I did cruel things too, but there was something in her vulnerability that just drew me to want to make a difference and help. And I've always had that. It doesn't make me a better or worse person than anyone. But at a certain point, we lean into who we really are, if we're lucky.
Yep.
And it is, I will say this, I don't want to misrepresent myself or the profession. It can also be very embittering. It can there are times that I'm very bitter that my phone rings at 2 a.m. and I have to go to the ER to help a family because someone overdosed. It's like, it's heavy sometimes.
Absolutely.
It's not easy. And I don't always have a great attitude about it, But I will say that when I look back at the sum total, I'm proud that I've done it. And I think I have been richer for it in the truest meaning of that word, rich. I think I've had a much richer life as a result of it than I would have otherwise, had I been some lawyer or banker or who knows what, or taken over my dad and my uncle's scrap metal yard in Minneapolis. I think it's been a very rich life, in the true meaning of rich. So, but I do think there is a duality to it, Chelsea. It's not always, I'm not always doing it with a smile on my face, and
Right.
But I still walk in the door.
Right. And that's the most important part. Yep. You're human just like us,
Yeah.
And I love that you say that, because everything is such a duality. And I didn't realize that until grief entered my life. It's a constant duality.
Memory, right? The duality of memory. It's
Absolutely.
Beautiful and it really hurts.
Yep. Absolutely.
The duality of death. It's a release and peace for the one who was afflicted and suffering. And it's enormously painful for everyone else. There's so much duality in it. And I think embracing that, knowing it and embracing it, and I guess what I would say is making peace with that dissonance.
Yep.
To me, that's the difference between being smart and being wise, between being old and being mature, is making peace with the duality and the dissonance in life and in death.
Absolutely. Oh, well, I wish we had a day to just keep
We can do
talking.
another one anytime. I will end where we began. I believe in what you're doing. It's important, and I'm always here to help.
Thank you so much. I just hope that how much this means to me, and it is such an honor, and you are just an incredible inspiration in my life. And I just want to thank you for, your time and just everything. And I will tell everybody how to get this book if they don't already have it. And so thank you.
You're so welcome. Keep going. And congratulations on graduating.
Thank you. It's so
You're
soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.